Sometimes the people most lost are the ones heaven knows how to find. Rain came hard over Black Hollow Forest that night, slanting through the pines in silver sheets and turning the dirt road into dark ribbons of mud. The kind of rain that erased tracks, muted sound, and made the whole world feel farther away than it was. Ethan Walker sat behind the wheel of his old Ford pickup with the engine off, listening to water drum against the roof like impatient fingers. He was 40 years old, broad-shouldered, gray-eyed, and worn in the quiet way some men become after carrying too much for too long. His beard had gone rough with neglect, and streaks of silver had begun to thread through his dark brown hair at the temples. Beside him, Rex, a 6-year-old German shepherd with a thick sable coat and alert amber eyes, lifted his head from the passenger seat. The dog's ears rose sharply toward the woods. Ethan noticed it at once. Rex never moved without reason. "What is it, boy?" he asked softly. The dog did not look at him. He stared into the black wall of trees where rain slid through branches and vanished into shadow. Then came the sound. Faint at first. So faint Ethan thought it might be the wind bending through the trunks. A child crying. He froze. It came again, thinner this time, trembling beneath the storm like something trying not to be heard. No houses stood within 10 miles of Black Hollow. No campsites. No roads past the old logging trail. Just forest, creek beds, and forgotten ground. Rex let out one sharp bark and sprang down from the truck the moment Ethan opened the door. Cold rain hit like needles. Mud pulled at his boots as he followed the dog into the trees. Branches clawed at his coat. Wet pine needles stuck to his jeans. The crying rose and fell ahead of them, never closer, never farther, as if the woods themselves were carrying it. Ethan's pulse quickened in a way he had not felt in years. Some instincts never truly leave a man. "Easy," he muttered, though he was not sure whether he meant himself or the dog. Rex moved with focused urgency, weaving between trunks, nose low, tail stiff. Then he stopped so suddenly Ethan nearly collided with him. Under a towering cedar, in a clearing washed pale by lightning, stood a little girl. She could not have been older than 7. Barefoot in the mud. Thin nightdress soaked by rain. Golden hair clinging to her cheeks. In one hand she held a small cloth doll against her chest. Her shoulders shook, but her eyes were strangely calm as they lifted to Ethan's face. He felt the breath leave him. "Hey there," he said gently, lowering himself to one knee. "You're okay now?" The girl looked at him as if she had been expecting him all along. Then she whispered words that turned the cold rain colder. "Mom said you would come." Ethan stared, unable to speak. Rex did not bark. He stepped forward, sniffed the child's hand once, then sat beside her like an old friend. Thunder rolled across the sky. Somewhere deeper in the forest, something wooden creaked in the wind. Ethan reached for the girl carefully, but his eyes caught one impossible detail. Her doll was perfectly dry. Ethan took off his canvas jacket and wrapped it around the girl before the cold could steal what little warmth she had left. The coat hung nearly to her ankles, but she did not complain or tremble the way most children would after standing barefoot in a storm. She simply watched him with those calm, pale eyes while rain streamed from the cedar branches above. Rex stayed pressed against her side, steady and protective, as if he had known her longer than a minute. "What is your name?" Ethan asked. "Lily," she said. Her voice was soft, clear, and strangely certain. "Lily what?" She lowered her gaze to the doll in her arms. "Just Lily." Thunder rolled again, farther off now, and the forest answered with 1,000 dripping leaves. Ethan scanned the darkness between the trees. "Where is your mother?" The girl pointed deeper into the woods, then let her hand fall. "She could not come." It was not the kind of answer a child usually gave. It sounded older somehow, like something remembered rather than spoken. Ethan swallowed the uneasy feeling rising in his chest. "All right," he said gently. We are getting out of this rain first. He lifted her into his arms. She was lighter than he expected, almost weightless beneath the wet fabric and his coat. Rex trotted ahead without command, leading them back through the pines as though the trail had become obvious only to him. By the time they reached the truck, the rain had softened to a steady whisper. Ethan set Lily on the passenger seat and wrapped an old wool blanket around her legs. Rex jumped in beside her and rested his chin across her lap. The girl smiled for the first time, and it changed the whole cab of the truck. Some smiles are small lights. Ethan drove another mile up the logging road to the abandoned ranger cabin he had been using for shelter that week. It was a weathered one-room structure with warped boards, a stone chimney, and a porch leaning slightly to one side like a tired man. Inside, it smelled of cedar dust, old smoke, and rain-soaked earth. Ethan lit the kerosene lamp, then knelt by the iron stove and coaxed a fire to life. Orange light began to move across the walls. Lily sat in the rocking chair near the stove, hands folded over her doll, studying the room as if she remembered it. Ethan opened a can of tomato soup and warmed it in a dented pot. He sliced the last 2 pieces of bread he had. When he set the bowl in front of her, she bowed her head first. "Thank you," she whispered, though he had not heard her pray. She ate slowly, neatly, with the manners of another time. Ethan watched in silence. Outside, wind moved through the trees like distant surf. Inside, the cabin settled and sighed. For the first time in many months, the room did not feel empty. Rex, however, was no longer resting. The dog stood suddenly, ears forward, eyes fixed on the back wall beside the old fireplace. A low growl rolled from his chest, deep and uncertain. Ethan turned. The fire flickered hard though no draft touched the room. Then Lily looked at the same wall and said quietly, "She hid it there so you would find it when you were ready." Ethan stared at the back wall, then at Lily, then back again. The words settled over the room like dust shaken loose from old beams. "Who hid what?" he asked. Lily did not answer right away. She traced one finger along the stitched seam of her cloth doll and watched the firelight move across the floorboards. "Something that belongs to you," she said at last. Her voice was gentle, almost apologetic, as if she knew how strange it sounded. Rex stepped closer to the wall and pawed once at the lower boards beside the fireplace stones. The growl had faded, replaced by an intense focus Ethan trusted more than most people. He grabbed the lantern from the table and crouched beside the dog. The cabin was old enough that every board held secrets of weather, smoke, and years. Yet one narrow plank near the base looked cleaner than the others, less warped, as if hands had touched it long after the rest had been forgotten. Ethan ran his fingers along the edge. There it was. A faint gap. He used the blade of his pocketknife to pry carefully. The wood resisted, then gave with a dry sigh. Behind it lay a shallow cavity no wider than a shoebox. Inside rested a tin box wrapped in yellowed oilcloth. For a moment Ethan did not move. Some discoveries feel less like finding and more like being found. He lifted the box and set it on the table. Rain tapped softly on the roof. The fire snapped once. Lily sat perfectly still in the rocking chair, eyes lowered, as if she already knew what waited inside. Ethan unlatched the rusted clasp. The lid opened with a metallic click that sounded much louder than it was. On top lay an envelope addressed in neat blue ink. Ethan Walker. His breath caught. He knew that handwriting before memory could even name it. He had seen it years ago on lunch notes, birthday cards, and one final postcard mailed from a hospital 2 states away. His mother had written like that, each letter careful and upright, as if words themselves deserved respect. His hands trembled as he opened the envelope. Inside was a single folded page. "Dear Ethan, if you are reading this, then grace has been kinder than life was to us. I prayed this cabin would wait for you. I prayed you would return when your heart was tired enough to hear what matters. Everything I could save is hidden where the stones remember warmth. Trust the dog. Trust the light. And no, I never stopped believing you would come home. Love always, Mom. Ethan read it twice. Then a third time, because some truths take more than one pass through the eyes. The room blurred. He lowered himself into the chair nearest the table and pressed the paper flat with both palms. His mother had died 22 years ago. He had been 18, angry at the world, too proud to make peace with anyone, especially himself. He had never known this place belonged to her. He had never known she had left anything behind. Rex nudged his knee with a wet nose. Ethan rested a hand on the dog's head without looking away from the letter. Beneath the envelope lay an old brass key, a county deed folded into quarters, and a small photograph. Ethan lifted the picture slowly. It showed a younger version of his mother standing on this very porch, smiling into the sun. Beside her was a little boy of 8 with dark hair and muddy boots. Him. Ethan turned toward Lily, questions crowding his throat. But the rocking chair was moving gently on its own. Ethan rose so quickly the chair legs scraped across the floorboards. The rocking chair beside the stove moved in slow, gentle arcs, forward and back, though no one sat in it now. The blanket Lily had worn was folded neatly across the seat. Her bowl was empty. The spoon rested beside it, dry and clean. "Lily," he called, turning toward the door. Only the wind answered through the chimney stones. Rex was already there, nose pressed to the crack beneath the cabin door, tail stiff, ears lifted high. Ethan crossed the room and opened it wide. Night air slipped in cold and clean. The storm had passed. Clouds were breaking apart overhead, revealing a wash of stars sharp as broken glass. The clearing outside shimmered with puddles and moonlight. No footprints marked the mud. Not Lily's small bare feet. Not even the trail they should have made coming in. Ethan stepped onto the porch and scanned the tree line. The pines stood dark and still, dripping silver. "Lily," he called again, louder this time. Nothing moved. Somewhere far off, an owl spoke once and fell silent. Rex trotted down the steps, circled the yard, then stopped near the old stone well 50 feet from the cabin. He did not bark. He simply sat and looked back at Ethan, the way he did when something mattered. Ethan walked to him slowly. The well was capped with weathered cedar planks held down by a rusted iron chain. Moss climbed the stones in green ribbons. He had noticed it before but never cared enough to inspect it. Tonight it felt different, as if the whole yard had been waiting for him to wake up. On top of the planks lay Lily's cloth doll. Dry as linen from a closet shelf. Ethan picked it up carefully. It smelled faintly of lavender and cedar. Sewn into the hem of the doll's dress was a tiny stitched letter L. Beneath it, almost hidden by thread, another letter. E. Ethan frowned. He turned the doll over and found a small bulge in the fabric. Using the tip of his knife, he opened one careful seam and reached inside. His fingers touched folded paper. He drew out a note no larger than a matchbook and unfolded it under the moonlight. "Where the water sings under stone." He read it twice, then looked at the well. Rex stood and placed one paw on the cedar cover. Ethan set the doll in his coat pocket and unhooked the chain. The iron links groaned softly, old and reluctant. He lifted the planks aside one by one. Cool air rose from below carrying the scent of minerals and long-kept darkness. Moonlight reached only a few feet into the shaft before dissolving. Then he heard it. Water moving somewhere beneath the stones, not still and stagnant, but flowing. A hidden stream. Ethan fetched the lantern and lowered it by its handle. Golden light swung in circles against the wall, revealing a narrow iron ladder bolted into the stone. 15 feet down, behind a curtain of roots and damp moss, sat a small wooden door set into the side of the well itself. His pulse thudded in his throat. He reached into his pocket and felt the brass key from the tin box. Some nights change a man by inches. Others change him all at once. Rex whined softly above him, then looked toward the forest as if guarding more than one secret at a time. Ethan gripped the ladder, lantern in one hand, key in the other, and began to climb down. Ethan descended slowly, boots finding each iron rung by feel while the lantern swung warm. Circles across the stone shaft. Moisture beaded on the walls and gathered into silver drops that fell with patient echoes. Above him, Rex paced once around the rim of the well, then settled where he could watch both the forest and the hole below. The dog understood thresholds better than most men. When Ethan reached the narrow ledge, he steadied himself against the cold stones and lifted the lantern toward the hidden door. It was made of old oak darkened by years underground, banded with black iron, small enough that a man had to stoop to enter. Water whispered somewhere beyond it, steady and alive. He slid the brass key into the lock. For a heartbeat nothing happened. Then the mechanism turned with surprising ease, as if it had been waiting to remember its purpose. Ethan pulled the door inward. A breath of cool air met him carrying the scent of cedar, earth, and something faintly sweet, like dried flowers stored in a drawer. He stepped through into a passage no more than 6 feet wide. The ceiling arched low overhead with hand-laid stone. To his left, clear water ran through a narrow channel cut into the floor, glimmering in the lantern light. To his right stood shelves built into the wall, each lined with jars, boxes, and wrapped bundles preserved by the cold. Whoever made this place had built it not in fear, but with care. Ethan moved deeper until the tunnel opened into a round chamber beneath the cabin yard. There, arranged with almost tender order, were trunks, tools, blankets, sealed tins, and stacked ledgers tied with ribbon. In the center stood a cedar table with one object resting on it alone. A glass jar filled with coins and folded bills. Taped to the side was a note in the same careful handwriting. For hard winters. Ethan exhaled a laugh that broke halfway into grief. His mother had known hardship so well she planned kindness for strangers she would never meet. He set the lantern down and opened one trunk. Inside were quilts, children's coats, wool socks, canned goods, and bars of soap wrapped in brown paper. Another trunk held family photographs, letters bundled by year, and legal folders sealed in wax sleeves. Ethan opened one of the folders and saw county maps marked in red ink, mineral surveys, water rights documents, and a deed bearing his family name. Walker Ridge Holdings. The land described was far larger than the cabin lot. Acres of timber, creek frontage, and ridge property stretching beyond Black Hollow. He blinked at the pages, certain he had misread them. His family had never spoken of land. They had spoken of overdue rent, second jobs, and making do. Yet here were records showing ownership long buried under silence. On the wall behind the table hung a framed verse written by hand. What is hidden in love returns in time. Ethan read it twice. The chamber suddenly felt less like a cache and more like a promise fulfilled late, but not lost. Then the lantern flame leaned sharply though no wind blew. He turned. At the far edge of the room, where the water disappeared through stone, stood Lily. Dry dress. Clean feet. Doll in her arms. She smiled with a sadness too old for a child. She said you would need more than money, Lily whispered. You would need to remember who you are. Ethan took one step toward her. Wait. But the lantern flickered once, and the place where she stood was empty except for a single white lily floating slowly in the narrow stream. Ethan stood motionless beside the cedar table while the white lily drifted along the narrow stream and disappeared beneath the stone wall. Some moments ask for logic and offer none. He searched the chamber with the lantern raised high, but there was no second passage, no hidden corner where a child could slip away. Only shelves, trunks, old wood, and the soft music of water moving through darkness. He knelt beside the channel and touched the surface. It was cold enough to wake every nerve in his hand. Real. Everything here was real, whether he understood it or not. Above him came a bark from the well opening, sharp and urgent. Rex. Ethan gathered the folders, the key, and one small stack of letters tied with blue ribbon. Then he climbed back to the ladder and rose toward the moonlight. Night air met him like a blessing when he reached the top. Rex immediately pressed against his legs, sniffing him from boots to shoulders, then nudged the bundle of papers in Ethan's hand as if approving the rescue of things long forgotten. The forest had changed. Clouds were gone. Stars burned clear above Black Hollow, and mist drifted low through the trees in silver ribbons. Ethan replaced the well cover, hooked the chain, and stood for a long time listening to the quiet. The kind of quiet that does not feel empty anymore. Inside the cabin, he fed Rex the last of the canned beef and set fresh water by the stove. Then he returned to the table, where the lamp cast a warm circle over the letters. The first envelope was addressed simply, "When you are ready to forgive yourself." Ethan stared at it until his throat tightened. There are wounds war leaves behind that no doctor can name. He opened the letter carefully. Dear Ethan, if life has made you hard, do not mistake hardness for strength. You were gentle once. You can be gentle again. Nothing you survived disqualified you from being loved. He lowered the page and closed his eyes. The room smelled of cedar smoke and cooling rain. Rex lay beside the stove, watching him with half-lidded eyes full of old loyalty. Ethan opened the next letter. It contained bank statements, trust documents, and a notarized transfer placing the cabin, surrounding acreage, and water rights solely in his name upon verification of identity. There were also records of monthly royalties from a natural spring company that had leased downstream access for years. The totals made him blink. More money than he had imagined seeing in 10 lifetimes. Yet what shook him most was not the amount. It was the date. Payments had continued for over a decade while he slept in shelters, worked odd jobs, and drifted from town to town. Somewhere, provision had existed while he believed only lack was real. Dawn began to pale the window glass before he noticed time had moved. Birds tested the morning with cautious notes. Ethan stepped outside with a mug of black coffee warming his hands. Mist floated over the clearing. On the porch rail sat Lily's cloth doll, dry and neatly mended where he had opened the seam. Beside it rested one final folded note. He knew the handwriting before he touched it. He opened the page. Go to the courthouse at noon. Ask for Margaret Hale. She has been waiting 20 years to meet you. Ethan looked toward the trees. Sunlight slipped through the branches in narrow golden beams. Rex came to stand beside him, ears forward, tail still. Some roads begin long before we choose to walk them. Ethan had not entered the county courthouse in nearly 20 years. The last time, he had been young, angry, and certain the world had already decided against him. This morning he arrived in a clean flannel shirt borrowed from a donation bin, worn jeans brushed free of dust, and boots polished with a rag until they almost remembered pride. Rex walked beside him on a short leash, calm and alert, drawing quiet smiles from the few people crossing the square. Maple Grove was the kind of town where clocks still chimed on the hour and strangers nodded without needing a reason. Sunlight poured over brick storefronts still damp from last night's storm. Ethan paused at the courthouse steps, a limestone building with white columns and windows tall enough to hold whole seasons of light. You ready? He asked the dog. Rex flicked one ear and climbed the steps first. Inside, the air smelled of paper, floor wax, and old oak. Ceiling fans turned lazily overhead. A woman at the front desk with silver hair, pearl earrings, and glasses on a chain looked up the moment Ethan entered. Her eyes widened, then softened in a way that startled him. Ethan Walker, she said, as though speaking a name she had rehearsed for years. I am Margaret Hale. She came around the desk before he could answer and took both his hands in hers. They were warm, steady hands, the kind that had signed papers and comforted strangers in equal measure. Your mother told me you would come when the time was right, she said quietly. Ethan felt the room tilt. You knew my mother? Margaret gave a small smile touched by sorrow. I knew her courage. She led him into a private office lined with shelves of ledgers and framed county maps. Rex settled by the door, eyes watchful but peaceful. Margaret opened a locked cabinet and withdrew a long cedar box. Dust had gathered on the lid, but the brass corners still shone. She asked me to keep this until you came in person, Margaret said. No mailing. No forwarding address. She was certain Grace would deliver you here one day. Ethan opened the box slowly. Inside lay a pocket watch engraved with his father's initials, a bundle of photographs, and another letter. Beneath them rested a cashier's check folded inside a protective sleeve. He stared at the amount until the numbers lost meaning. It was enough to erase debts he had never dared count, enough to build shelter where he had once begged for one. Margaret watched him kindly. The spring royalties accumulated in trust. Your mother never touched them after the lease began. She said they were for your second life. Ethan swallowed hard. Why did nobody tell me? Margaret's gaze lowered. We tried. You moved often after the service. Phones changed. Addresses vanished. But your mother said not to chase you too hard. She believed a man must walk through some deserts on his own before he can recognize water. Ethan unfolded the letter. Dear son, if this reaches your hands, then you have already survived what I could not protect you from. Do not waste years asking why pain came. Ask instead what kindness you can build with what remains. Houses can be rebuilt. So can men. Tears came before he could stop them. He covered his face with one hand and let the silence hold him. Margaret pretended to straighten papers and gave him the dignity of not being watched. After a moment she said softly, there is one more thing. She slid a deed across the desk. It named Ethan Walker as owner of the old Maple Grove community home, closed for 7 years. Your mother bought it quietly before she passed, Margaret said. She wanted it reopened someday for veterans and children with nowhere safe to go. Rex rose at once, tail thumping once against the floor, as if he understood every word. Ethan left the courthouse carrying a folder of deeds, letters, and numbers that could have changed any man, yet what weighed most in his hands was purpose. Money can surprise the mind, but purpose reaches deeper. Rex trotted beside him through the town square, tail level, ears alert, as church bells marked noon across. Maple Grove. The old community home stood 3 blocks away on Willow Street, behind rows of sugar maples just beginning to leaf. Ethan had passed it years ago without seeing it. Today it seemed to step forward from memory. It was a broad 2-story brick house with white trim, a wraparound porch, and windows clouded by time. Ivy climbed one side like green handwriting. The sign near the gate leaned crooked but readable. Maple Grove Community Home. Closed until further notice. Ethan pushed the gate open. It gave with a rusty sigh. Gravel crunched beneath his boots as he walked the path. Rex moved ahead, nose busy in the spring air, then bounded onto the porch and sat before the front door as if reporting for duty. Ethan smiled despite himself. All right, partner. He slid the brass house key Margaret had given him into the lock. The door opened on the first turn. Inside, dust drifted in shafts of sunlight. The foyer smelled of old pine floors, dry plaster, and years of waiting. A staircase curved upward beneath a stained-glass window showing a river beneath stars. Ethan stood still, listening. Empty buildings have their own silence, but this one did not feel abandoned. It felt paused. He walked room to room with Rex close behind. There was a dining hall with long tables stacked against the wall, a kitchen lined with steel counters, 6 bedrooms upstairs, and a playroom where faded animal murals still smiled from peeling paint. In one corner lay a small wooden block carved with the letter L. Ethan picked it up slowly. Dust had settled around it, but the top surface was clean, as if touched recently. He turned it over in his palm and slipped it into his pocket. In the office near the back hall he found a framed photograph of his mother standing on the porch beside a younger Margaret Hale and a group of children laughing into the wind. On the back someone had written, "Keep the light on for those who arrive late." Ethan sat at the desk and closed his eyes. For years he had believed his life was a series of endings. Yet all around him were rooms built for beginnings. Rex barked once from the kitchen. Ethan followed and found the dog staring at a bulletin board covered with old notices and yellowed thank you cards. Pinned in the center was a drawing done in crayon. A man holding the hand of a little girl while a dog walked beside them under a bright sun. 3 figures, simple and joyful. In the corner, a child's handwriting read, "Someday he will come back." Ethan's throat tightened. "Who drew this?" he whispered to the empty room. Wind moved softly through a cracked window above the sink. Then from the second floor came the faint sound of footsteps crossing the hall. Ethan looked up sharply. Rex was already racing for the stairs, claws tapping wood, body full of focused urgency. Ethan followed fast, heart pounding not from fear, but from the strange hope that had begun to live inside it. Rex reached the second floor landing first and stopped at the end of the hallway, body still, ears lifted toward the last room on the right. Sunlight from the tall stair window stretched across the floorboards in long golden bars, warming dust motes that drifted like tiny lanterns in the air. Ethan climbed the final steps and listened. No footsteps now. No movement. Only the faint groan of an old house settling into itself. Yet something had been there. He knew the difference between silence and the echo of something just gone. "Easy," he said quietly, though his own pulse was moving fast. Rex padded forward and nudged the partly open door with his nose. It swung inward on a slow hinge. The room beyond was small and bright, painted years ago in pale yellow. A child's room. White curtains stirred at the open window. Shelves lined one wall, holding worn storybooks, a wooden horse, and a row of glass jars filled with buttons sorted by color. Against the far wall stood a narrow bed made neatly with a quilt stitched in stars. Ethan stepped inside with the careful feeling people bring into churches and hospitals. Some rooms remember tenderness so strongly it lingers after everyone leaves. On the dresser sat a framed photograph. Ethan picked it up. It showed his mother several years older than in the porch picture, standing between 2 children in front of the community home. One child was a boy of about 10 with dark hair and stubborn eyes. Ethan recognized himself after a moment. The other was a little girl with golden hair holding a cloth doll. Lily. His breath caught. He turned the frame over. Written on the back were the words, "Ethan and Lily, summer of 1989. Come back soon." He stared at the name until the room blurred. Memory is a strange country. It hides roads until grief walks you back to them. Fragments returned in flashes. A little hand tugging his sleeve. Laughter on porch steps. His mother braiding a child's hair while humming near an open window. Then another memory, sharper than the rest. A hospital corridor. Rain on glass. Adults speaking in low voices. Someone saying Lily had gotten sick too fast. Ethan sat slowly on the edge of the bed. He had been 10 when Lily died. Not a sister by blood, but the daughter of a family his mother helped through the home. After Lily passed, her grieving mother moved away. His own father left not long after. Then illness took his mother years later, and life scattered everything that remained. Time had not stolen the memories. It had buried them to spare him. Rex pawed gently beneath the bed. Ethan knelt and reached under the frame. His hand touched a tin box wrapped in a faded ribbon. Inside lay dozens of drawings in a child's hand. Dogs with giant ears. Houses with smoking chimneys. A tall man in a green uniform. And again, a dark-haired boy standing beside a little girl. At the bottom was one final folded page. Ethan opened it carefully. It showed the same three figures beneath a bright yellow sun. Above them, in careful letters, were words written phonetically by a child learning to spell. "When I go to heaven I will ask God to bring Ethan home someday." Tears slipped down Ethan's face before he noticed them. Rex pressed against his shoulder. Outside, wind moved through the maples with the sound of distant applause. Then from downstairs came three soft chimes, clear and silver, though no clock in the house had worked for years. Ethan rose from the child's bed with the drawing still in his hand as the three soft chimes drifted upward through the stairwell. Clear. Delicate. Unmistakable. They did not sound like the heavy courthouse bells in town. Or the old clock towers that groaned before striking. These were smaller notes, bright as drops of water falling into glass. Rex was already in the hallway, tail level, head turned toward the stairs. "You hear it too," Ethan whispered. The dog glanced back once, then moved down the corridor with quick, quiet steps. Ethan followed, carrying the tin box against his chest as though it contained something breakable beyond paper. The house seemed different now. Less empty. Sunlight poured stronger through the windows, warming the worn banister, brightening old paint, touching places long ignored. He descended the staircase slowly. The chimes came again from the foyer below. 3 notes. Pause. 3 notes. Waiting can have a sound of its own. At the bottom of the stairs, Ethan stopped. Hanging beside the front door was a silver bell no larger than a coffee mug, suspended from a carved wooden bracket shaped like branches and leaves. He had passed it earlier without noticing. Now it swayed gently on its own, though no breeze touched the hull. Rex sat beneath it and looked up with calm attention, as if greeting an old friend. Ethan approached carefully. Fine engravings circled the bell's rim. Names. Dozens of them etched in tiny letters. Some worn by time, some sharp and new. Children, veterans, widows, strangers. He recognized one immediately. Lily Harper. Beneath it, added years later in steadier script, Marion Walker. His mother. Ethan touched the metal. It was warm. A folded card was tucked behind the wooden bracket. He opened it with trembling fingers. "Ring this bell whenever someone finds their way home." Tears rose before he finished the sentence. He looked around the foyer with new eyes. The benches by the wall where tired people once waited. The coat hooks hung low enough for children to reach. The basket of umbrellas by the door. This place had not been built as charity. It had been built as welcome. Margaret Hale's words returned to him. "Keep the light on for those who arrive late." Ethan set the drawing on the side table and rang the bell once. The tone shimmered through the halls like sunlight through water. Somewhere upstairs, a floorboard answered with a small creak. Somewhere in the kitchen, a window latch clicked softly shut. Rex wagged his tail and barked once, joyful and brief. Then there came a knock at the front door. Ethan opened it to find 3 people on the porch. A gray-haired pastor holding a toolbox, a middle-aged woman carrying a tray covered in foil, and a teenage boy with paint cans in both hands. They smiled as if expected. "Miss Hale called," the woman said. "She said the house is opening again." The pastor lifted the toolbox. "I can fix plumbing, wiring, and anything that complains louder than I do." The boy raised the paint cans. "I skipped baseball practice." Ethan could not speak for a moment. He had grown used to doors closing. He had forgotten some open wider than reason. "Come in," he said at last, voice rough with feeling. They stepped inside laughing softly, bringing with them the smell of fresh bread, sawdust, and spring air. Rex circled them approvingly before trotting toward the kitchen like a host showing guests where warmth lived. Ethan looked once more at the silver bell. It had gone still now, catching sunlight along its polished edge. In that gleam, for only a breath, he thought he saw a little girl smiling beside his mother near the staircase. By the next morning, the old house no longer sounded abandoned. Hammers tapped in steady rhythm. Floorboards answered with cheerful groans. Windows opened to let in April air scented with lilac and damp earth. In the kitchen, pans clinked while coffee steamed and cinnamon rolls cooled beneath clean towels. Life had returned not with fanfare, but with useful hands. Ethan stood on the front porch holding a mug of black coffee, watching townspeople come through the gate carrying ladders, paintbrushes, boxes of dishes, and armfuls of blankets. Some he knew by face alone. Some were strangers. Yet all of them nodded as if they had been waiting for a signal only they understood. Rex moved from person to person like a careful inspector, accepting scratches behind the ears and approving each arrival with a calm wag. The teenage boy from yesterday painted the porch railings bright white while singing off-key. The pastor repaired a stubborn sink that had not run in years. The woman with the foil tray, whose name was Denise, organized pantry shelves with military precision and insisted Ethan eat every 2 hours whether hungry or not. "You look like a man who forgot meals were invented," she told him. Ethan laughed more in that morning than he had in months. Maybe years. Laughter felt rusty at first, then natural. Margaret Hale arrived just before noon carrying a banker's box of files and a potted fern. "Every proper home needs records and something green," she said. They sat together in the office while sunlight warmed the desk. She spread papers before him, budgets, grant opportunities, contractor estimates, and lists of former residents now grown and scattered across the country. "Many of them still write at Christmas," she said. "They never forgot this place." Ethan looked through letters signed by teachers, nurses, mechanics, and parents thanking the home for giving them one safe season when they had none. His mother's name appeared often, always with affection. She was not wealthy, Margaret said softly. But she knew how to make people feel they still mattered. Ethan lowered his eyes. "I should have come back sooner." Margaret reached across the desk and tapped the folder closed. "Regret is a room with no windows. Step out of it." Her tone was kind but firm. "You are here now. That is enough." He nodded slowly. Some truths arrive plain dressed and hit harder than poetry. In the afternoon, Ethan walked upstairs carrying fresh sheets for the yellow room that had once belonged to Lily. He paused at the doorway. The bed had been remade by unseen hands. The quilt of stitched stars lay smooth and centered. On the pillow rested Lily's cloth doll. Clean. Smiling. Waiting. Ethan crossed the room with careful steps. In the doll's lap was a folded note written in childlike print. "Thank you for coming home." He sat on the edge of the bed and let tears come without shame. Through the open window, children's laughter floated from the yard below where neighbors had begun cleaning the garden beds. Rex appeared in the doorway and patted in quietly, placing his head on Ethan's knee. "I know," Ethan whispered, stroking the dog's ears. "I know." When he looked back, the note was gone, though the doll remained. That evening they served supper in the dining hall at long tables polished with lemon oil and hope. 12 people came the first night. 2 veterans. A widow. A young mother and son. 3 teenagers between homes. Others simply lonely enough to need company. Ethan stood at the head of the room, uncertain what to say. Then the silver bell by the front door rang once on its own. Warm laughter moved through the hall. Ethan smiled and raised his glass of iced tea. "Welcome," he said. And for the first time in a long while, the word belonged to him too. Summer arrived gently in Maple Grove, as if careful not to disturb the miracle already underway. The maples along Willow Street filled with deep green leaves, porch screens hummed with evening crickets, and the old community home carried the sounds of ordinary grace from sunrise until long after dark. Doors opened and closed. Dishes clinked. Laundry turned in the basement machines. Laughter traveled through hallways that had once held only dust. Ethan woke each morning before dawn, brewed coffee for whoever needed it, and walked the garden rows with Rex while Dew silvered the tomato leaves. The dog had grown famous in town. Children waited by the fence to throw tennis balls for him. Veterans scratched behind his ears before hard conversations. Somehow Rex always knew who needed comfort first. The home now housed 12 residents full-time and fed many more each week. A retired carpenter named Mr. Delaney taught teenagers how to repair furniture in the garage. Denise ran the kitchen like a loving storm and somehow stretched every dollar farther than numbers should allow. Margaret Hale managed paperwork, grants, and the kind of stubborn details that keep kindness standing upright. Ethan handled whatever remained. Roof leaks. Late-night worries. Grocery runs. Quiet talks on the porch with men who woke from bad dreams and thought nobody understood. He did. Some scars speak without words. One warm Saturday afternoon, a black sedan pulled to the curb. A woman in her early 40s stepped out with a little girl holding her hand. The child had golden hair and carried a cloth doll. Ethan felt the world pause. The woman approached slowly. "My name is Anna Harper," she said. "I used to live here as a child." Her voice trembled with memory. "My sister Lily died when we were young. My mother never recovered. But she always talked about this place, and a boy named Ethan who was kind to Lily when she was sick." Ethan could not speak for a moment. He looked at the little girl beside her. "This is my daughter," Anna said softly. "Her name is Lily." The child smiled and held up the doll. "Grandma made it from the old pattern," she said proudly. Ethan knelt to her height. "It is beautiful," he said, and meant more than the doll. They spent the afternoon walking the house. Anna stopped often, touching doorframes, windowsills, the staircase rail. In the yellow room she wept quietly, then laughed through tears when young Lily declared it the best bedroom in America. Before leaving, Anna placed an envelope in Ethan's hands. "My mother wanted you to have this if the house ever reopened." Inside was a photograph of 2 children on the porch steps. 10-year-old Ethan holding the hand of the original Lily while Rex's ancestor, another shepherd, sat beside them. On the back were words written by Anna's mother years later. "Thank you for loving my daughter when time was short." That evening a summer storm rolled across town. Guests gathered on the porch to watch rain stripe the street in silver lines. Ethan stood near the doorway, photograph in hand, while Rex leaned against his leg. Lightning flashed far away, followed by soft thunder. Then the silver bell beside the door rang once on its own. Everyone turned. In the reflection on the glass, Ethan saw for a heartbeat his mother standing beside a little girl in a pale dress, both smiling into the warm lamplight. When he blinked, only rain remained. Yet peace stayed behind, steady as breath. Some prayers take years to answer because they arrive carrying more than we asked for. Autumn came to Maple Grove in colors too rich to hurry past. The maples on Willow Street turned gold and crimson, leaves spinning across the porch steps like little letters from the sky. Inside the community home, the season carried its own music. Soup simmered on the stove. Laundry baskets thumped down the hall. Someone always laughed in the kitchen before sunrise. Someone always cried a little less before bed. Ethan Walker had become the kind of man people trusted without needing to know why. He fixed broken hinges, balanced budgets, listened longer than most, and never asked anyone to explain pain before offering them a chair. The lines around his eyes remained, but they no longer belonged to sorrow alone. Rex aged with dignity and appetite. White fur touched his muzzle now, yet he still made nightly rounds through every room, checking doors, beds, and hearts with equal seriousness. Residents joked that no one truly checked in until Rex approved them. Ethan knew better than to argue. On the first cold evening of October, the house hosted its annual harvest supper. Long tables filled the dining hall end to end. Veterans sat beside teenagers. Widows beside young parents. Neighbors beside strangers who would not remain strangers for long. Candles glowed in mason jars. Bread baskets passed from hand to hand. Denise ruled the kitchen with heroic authority while Margaret pretended not to steal extra pie. After the meal, Ethan stepped onto the porch for air. The night smelled of wood smoke and apples. Across the yard, lanterns lined the path like patient stars. Rex joined him and leaned against his leg with the comfortable weight of old friendship. "We did all right, partner," Ethan said softly. The dog looked toward the gate and gave one quiet wag. A pickup truck had just stopped at the curb. A young man climbed out carrying a duffel bag, shoulders tight with the posture of someone trying not to fall apart in public. He hesitated at the gate. Ethan knew that look. He had worn it once for years. Ethan walked down the path before the man could change his mind. "Can I help you?" he asked. The stranger swallowed hard. "I was told this place helps veterans," he said. "I do not have anywhere else tonight." Ethan took the duffel bag from his hand as naturally as receiving a coat from family. "Then you came to the right porch." Rex stepped forward, sniffed the young man once, and sat beside him like a seal of approval. Tears filled the man's eyes before he could hide them. Ethan placed a hand on his shoulder and guided him toward the warm light spilling from the doorway. As they reached the porch, the silver bell beside the door rang once on its own, clear and bright in the autumn dark. Conversations inside paused, then resumed with laughter. Nobody seemed surprised anymore. Ethan glanced through the foyer glass. For the briefest instant he saw two figures near the staircase. His mother in her blue cardigan. Lily in a pale dress, one hand resting on Rex's younger head. Both smiling with the peaceful look of people whose work had been completed well. Then the reflection shifted, and only lamplight remained. Ethan opened the door wide. Heat, voices, and the smell of cinnamon rushed out to meet them. The young man stepped inside. Rex followed. Ethan entered last and touched the bell gently as he passed. Some miracles arrive in thunder. Others come quietly, one lost person at a time. And in Maple Grove, the light stayed on.